That was actually after I was approached by Vince McMahon in WWF.
But I read that you turned down the initial offer presented to you by WWF. Were you too good to be a pro wrestler? What was your attitude? Hey, I want to know.
I didn't turn it down. Okay, first of all, when I was approached, Vince McMahon flew me up. I sat down with him, and me knowing nothing about the business, I told Vince. He offered me the contract. It was a 10-year deal, and it was a lot of money. And I didn't make any money as an amateur wrestler, so here was this multi-million-dollar deal, thank God. And I said, you know what, there's one thing, though, I need to tell you, Vince, or Mr. McMahon, I can't lose.
You can't lose in pro wrestling. Vince, you are one crazy bastard. Keep going.
So Vince, I could tell he wanted to bust out laughing, but he was trying to keep his face straight. And I didn't know anything about it. I believe Bruce Pritchard was in the room as well. And he said, well, take the contract home, think about it, but I can't promise you you're going to win every match. And I took the contract home, and I took it to my agent, Ralph Sindrich, who happens to be a very successful NFL agent. He's also Ben Roethlisberger's agent. And at the time, he took the contract from me, and he threw it in the garbage. He said, you're not doing this crap. And I literally never looked back. I went and I did a stint as a sportscaster for a year and did a lot of motivational speaking, and I did a lot of clinics and camps for wrestling. And one night in late '98, I turned on Raw's War, and I saw a character named Stone Cold Steve Austin. And the stuff that you guys were doing, you're actually, Steve, I'm not doing this to put you over, but you're actually the reason I started. And it wasn't just you, but I mean, at the time, you were so hot, and everybody, it was just this Stone Cold Steve Austin craze thing going on, and I'm watching you wrestle, and wow, this guy's actually a really great athlete, and on the mic, he's entertaining and funny and intense. And I said, you know what, it'd be really cool if I could do that. And I remember at the time, you guys had so many different, wrestlers, great wrestlers like Triple H and The Rock and Undertaker and Kane, a lot of great characters, even guys like Val Venus and Bob Holly. I mean, everybody was over, and it was the Attitude Era. And I looked at my girlfriend at the time. You know what? I think I'm going to call WWE and WWF at the time, and I'm going to see if that contract still stands. And I called, and Vince McMahon said, actually, I'm sorry, not Vince McMahon, Jim Ross. I talked to him, and I asked if the contract would still go as planned. He said no. He said,
"Oh shit!
At this point, you're going to have to come up and try out."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, all right, I'll come up and try out." And Steve, when I went up the first day, my manager was there. I took 3 bumps in the ring, and I can tell everybody listening, it was the hardest thing I ever did. Every bump killed me. I looked at my manager, and I said, I don't think I can do this. And I always tell everybody, I was an amateur wrestler, Olympic gold medalist, one of the toughest sports in the world. I was a great football player, one of the toughest sports in the world. I got in that wrestling ring, and after 3 bumps, I literally said, these pro wrestlers are either crazy or they're the baddest MFers in the world. And that doesn't mean they can kick your ass, but they can take a beating more than any individual in this whole world.
There's nothing like slamming into that mat, and it's just a total come to Jesus meeting with reality. Whatever you think about that business, it all changes as soon as you hit that mat, mister, and you either learn to love bumping or you kind of just don't really get into business because it just goes part and parcel with the business. When I broke in Chris Adams School, I mean, basically the school was learning how to take a bump. I barely learned how to wrestle at all. They covered the basics, but it was all about slapping that mat, a karate-type fall, protect your back. Because as you know, if you want to take that flat back landing, when you start landing in stages and whip the rest of your body down, that's when everything gets discombobulated, and that's when the injuries start piling up. So you go in, you do your tryout, you take those 3 bumps, you think, oh, holy shit, what have I gotten myself into? What was your mindset then?
I was going to quit. and my manager talked me into
You
staying,
hadn't even started yet.
I'm telling you, it was the hardest thing I ever did in my life, and I stayed. And within 4 days, I had my first match, and I didn't know what I was doing. It was against Tom Pritchard, and he called the whole thing, and I just followed him, and it came to me relatively easy, even though I look back, and it was hard as heck, because here I was, and I will admit to everyone that I didn't know what I was doing when I started on TV. When I started on TV, and I mean, I worked my way up the ranks faster than anyone that I've ever seen. I was wrestling you and The Rock within my first year, and I didn't know a thing about wrestling.
I can vouch for you. You didn't know a thing. No, I'm kidding you. I'm kidding you. When you broke into business, on record, at any interview I've ever done, I say on the record, no one has ever picked up the business of professional wrestling as fast as Kurt Angle. I mean, it was absolutely incredible how you were able to come in, adapt. I mean, obviously, your wrestling background helps with all of the wrestling, but amateur wrestling and pro wrestling, and you throw into psychology, and then the work aspect, and you've got to lose that mark aspect from when you first came into that contract and said, I'm not going to lose. There's just so much that goes into it, but Jesus, I mean, you were like a duck to water.
Yeah, but you know what? The thing I did when I started is I watched the top guys. I watched you. I watched Triple H. I watched The Rock. I watched Undertaker. I watched, whether it had to do with promos or it had to do with wrestling. With you, it was both, because people don't know this, because you're so underrated as a wrestler because your character was so damn strong that people don't know how good you were. You were in the ring, you were the best improviser I've ever wrestled. That means we didn't have to plan anything backstage. You could lead me through a match, and I didn't have to think about anything because all I had to do was listen to you. I can't say that about every wrestler. I think Triple H was pretty good at it. Taker was pretty good at it, but you were the best. There were guys that needed to call everything back in the back, and I'm not going to say that they were, but with you, it was so easy because all I had to do was go out there and listen to you. And you made me look good, so everybody thought that I was better than I really was. But I did catch on. But from listening to you and working with you and watching you, and I did the same thing in amateur wrestling. I studied tapes. I kept watching you and watching the top guys and studying you and seeing what to do, not only from a wrestling aspect, but from an entertaining aspect. And it got a lot easier when I turned my instincts off from amateur wrestling, I started learning something new, which was the art of pro wrestling. The psychology is so hard. Everybody thinks you just go out there and do a bunch of stunts. If that's what you do,